First up is Michael Halper. He is the founder and CEO of Sales Scripter. It's a software platform and sales methodology that helps salespeople have clarity for what to say and ask while prospecting for sales. You can check that all out at salesscripter.com. So 2 things you should be doing right now, right? Multitasking, because I know you multitask. Bring up another tab, salesscripter.com. Type it in. Check them out. Also, in the other tab where you have LinkedIn open already because you're busy doing social selling, bring him up. If he's not a first connection, send him a connection request. Michael Halper, welcome to the show, my friend. Yeah. It is great to be here, is it not? I agree with you. Next up is Michael Bedone. He's the founder and CEO of SalesBuzz.com, and he's helped hundreds of companies across the globe improve their sales just by using his no-nonsense phone sales techniques. So same thing, another tab, go to SalesBuzz.com, check it out. On your LinkedIn, go reach out to Michael Bedone. If he's not a first connection, send him a connection request. I love Michael. We were just discussing about how he and I were involved in another virtual online multi-day summit. And there's always these competitions going on that you don't know about who can drive the most attendees to these things. And I was feeling pretty cocky that VanillaSoft was going to win it. And on the last day, this company called SalesBuzz.com just blows past us and kicks our behind. And I wasn't happy. So as retribution, I'm making him come on our show today. Michael, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
All right. So these are the 2 smart guys. They're going to talk to you about all things sales objections. Today, what are we covering, if you're wondering about that? We're going to cover all about objections, what are winning strategies, how we're going to give you the kind of 5 ways you can handle that, because that was our promise to you, 5 winning ways you can do this. But we're going to start the conversation before we even get there about the importance of your opening value statement. Then we're going to go into, it says Q&A there, but wait, because that is normal. That's normally what we do. Before we get to Q&A, I'm going to have a game show. I'm not making this up, a real life game show right here. So on our next slide, it's all about objections, objections, objections. So I want to hear from each of our guests, maybe a good war story, a good, I don't know, just some mythology, some great, lore about what they've seen when it comes to objections that we want to share today. Now, one last piece of housekeeping. I've got Michael and I've got Michael. So we made an executive decision that I'm going to refer to them as Bedone and Halper. All right. And then they'll know who I'm talking to. So let's go with Halper first. Give me a piece of interesting story about your experience with objections.
Well, I think the first thing to say is that we've all been there. We've all been shot down. We've all faced difficult objections. We've screwed up. We have all dealt with objections in the proper way and still got shot down. So I can't really think of exact, war stories just because there's been many. What I would reflect on more is that there's common scenarios that we all have to face. For example, gatekeepers use the objection of what's this in regards to? And while it sounds like a question, it's an objection. They ask that question for you to get you, the salesperson, to say something that flags you as, hey, I'm a salesperson trying to sell something. And once you then raise that flag, they know not only is it okay to get rid of you, but they need to get rid of you, because if they don't get rid of you, they will look bad. So that's an example of a common objection. And if you respond to that objection with the honest answer, right? They're asking you a question. What is this in regards to? Well, you are a salesperson trying to sell something. So what's the honest answer? Well, the honest answer is, well, I'm calling to introduce myself. I'm calling to introduce my company. I'm calling to see what you guys need, or if you need what I sell. I'm calling to schedule an appointment. So if you say anything like that, you are raising the flag, putting a neon sign above you that says, I'm a salesperson that's trying to sell something. And so you can make one small change with how you respond to that. And we could talk about that here today and decrease how the level of resistance you get from gatekeepers. So that's just one example. It's the same objections again and again. So if someone was going to change one thing in their sales efforts or their sales training or their methodology, I would say prepare yourself for a handful of the common objections, and you'll immediately improve your sales results.
I love it. I love it. You've already given the crew permission to know that they're going to make mistakes if they haven't already. You're not alone, so that's very cool. The other part is, just as you were talking about it, Mr. Helper, I was just thinking to myself, I know that feeling of when they give you that, what do you want? Well, I want to introduce my company. You're already on the defensive, and you just know that this is just not going as you planned and how you want it to go. Like, you're so excited, they picked up the phone, and right away, this is just going down. So I understand that. I get it. I appreciate that. Let's flip it over to Mr. Padone, my friend, sir. When it comes to objections, what comes to mind?
So there's a couple of things. So regarding the war stories, I think one of the biggest war stories I see commonly as sales reps, whether they're new or they're veterans, is a lot of times they get an objection and they go, okay, when should I follow up with you? I mean, like they fold, right? And well, first of all, I love certain kind of objections. You have to understand that there's different places for objections. There's different reasons for them. If you're getting objections up front where you can't even get to first base, that's a whole different scenario than if you're getting objections at the end. So they're all easy to solve, believe it or not. And actually, the best way to handle objection is to preempt it. And I'm going to show you some ways to do that. But you have to understand something. Objections are not the problem. They're the symptom. So if you're always trying to solve the objections as if it's a problem, you're going to keep having these. I mean, just say if you went to a doctor and they just tried to treat the symptom and not the real problem, you could probably die of a heart attack. You know what I mean? Eventually, if they don't solve the real thing. Well, in sales, it's the same way. So I look at objections a little bit differently. I break them down into certain compartments. And if you're getting the same objections over and over again, like, hey, send me some information. We're not interested, not in the budget. These are all sales process problems. These are mistakes that you're making in your sales process that you can easily fix. Just like the gatekeeper one. The gatekeeper is so easy to get by. When I call somebody, if I'm cold calling them, I have two strategies. One, it could just be, hi, this is Michael Padone with salesbuzz.com, and I'm getting back in touch with, and I just say the prospect's name, and they go, okay, 1 second. They just put me right through. I give them the three things they need. They need to know who I am, what company I'm with, and then the reason for my call. So I tell them all that, and the reason for my call is I'm getting back in touch with so-and-so. Or I could say something along the lines of, the reason for my call is there's a possibility I might be able to help so-and-so get their team to overcome call reluctance, but I would need to ask them a few questions first to be sure. And I was wondering if you could put me through them, if that'd be okay. They're like, well, they're not qualified to deject that, right? If I called to say I offer sales training, they could say, we already have somebody that does that. They're not going to be interested. But if I go, hey, there's a possibility I might be able to help them solve this, but I would just need to ask them a few questions first. I want to see if he's available. That'd be great. They go, okay, and they put me through like at a 90% rate. So I don't even get rejected by gatekeepers anymore. So there's all kinds of ways to preempt that.
So we're going to talk a bit about that, Shorty, because you've actually touched on something that's really valuable about being proactive in anticipation of incoming objections. So hold that thought. On the next slide, we asked the question, are there actual winning strategies? But the truth of the matter is what we're actually asking here is this something that can be learned? I'll put myself out there. Only I can do this because I've been married for forever now. But when I was a single man and I would, go to the local watering hole and I would see an attractive individual across the room that, caught my eye, I would go over there and give my best opening line and objection. And I would go, and I would just get shot down, and go back and order an extra beer. Whereas my colleagues could walk over and they could just move with the objections, and before you know it, they're laughing and giggling and they're on their own private booth. That was never me. So is this something that can be taught? Can I become that cool kid that just knows how to roll with the punches? Yes or no?
If you have the right personality, you can. If you have the right personality, you can.
Okay, hold that thought. Halper, what do you think?
Well, let's take a step back, actually. And one thing that I actually disagree with a lot of, it's a very common belief, is that a lot of people believe salespeople are born. That if you have the precious personality and certain set of traits that that someone needs to be born with, you can be a good salesperson. And if you don't have that, then you can't. And I personally disagree with that. I think all personality types, all backgrounds, you can learn to sell, because I believe it's a skill, and you can learn what to do and what not to do. And dealing with objections is a great example of that. For example, there are about 10 common objections, and I think we're probably going to talk about most of those here today, but that there are about 10 objections that come up again and again. And the wrong way to go about it is to not think about those objections and then just go out, and when you face them, try to improvise and think, okay, well, what do I do now? And that's the path. That's a path for failure, or And so the other way to go would be to think about those and think about, how can I respond to these? And there are certain ways you can respond, or certain ways you can avoid responding, that improve your ability to get around those. Now, does it work every time? No. You could do everything right and still have a difficult gatekeeper or a difficult prospect and get shot down or blocked out. But if you have a game plan and a logic or clarity in your head for what you're going to do when these common objections come up again and again, you can clearly impact your results, improve your results, and the majority of the time will be immediate. If you have a game plan today and you start using it tomorrow, your results tomorrow can be better. I mean, immediate results. So I think you can win and you can improve, no doubt about it.
All right, so I want to go to the next slide to get ready into this, because what I heard you two gentlemen say was it can be taught. So everybody who's on this webinar today in the audience, who is, maybe you're young in your career or you're young in the sales role, and you're like, oh man, I suck at this. Listen to what Halper just said to you. It can be taught. So don't beat yourself up. But Badone says a little bit, well, it depends on your personality. So I would rephrase what he said, and I would say, well, it depends on how you approach it, how you handle it. Well, it's not just words, it's demeanor.
Well, let me clarify that. Let me clarify that, because here's the thing. I mean, not everybody, we can all catch a football, but we're not all going to be Jerry Rice, right? But even Jerry Rice, when he was playing, maybe there's a lot of millennials here who don't know Jerry Rice. He's probably one of the greatest receivers, right?
Yes.
Right. So, but one
Go
of the greatest
49ers.
NFL receivers of all time, absolutely. But
Yes.
the thing is this: even he, I mean, he wasn't born that way. To Halpert's point, right? He wasn't born that way. He studied, he practiced over and over to the day he retired. He was still training hard, right? So he was always learning and he was always working on. But he had his natural ability. There's going to be some people that just aren't cut out for sales. I think it's very small. Just like I don't think everybody can learn how to sell, just like everybody can't learn to be a successful. I guess maybe we need to add the successful part in there. It's just not in everybody's DNA, in the sense that's not their path. I think maybe better, it's not everybody's path. So I think we just need to clarify that. But if you want to be in sales, I think that's the key. So that's what I mean by your personality. If you want to be in sales and you want to make money, you have the motivation to do it, absolutely you can learn this. It's not hard. It's not that difficult to learn if you just learn and you follow the simple basic steps. You're going to be better than most that are out there. That much I think we agree on for sure.
So we totally agree on that one. And I would almost maybe use a different word just for shoots and giggles. I would say it's almost a little bit your mindset and how you approach it, right? Mm-hmm. I would also counsel you this if you're listening. Okay, so we're gonna teach you today, but you're gonna apply what you learn here, and you're still gonna make mistakes, and you're gonna go, but Badone and Halper said that's okay. You're gonna stumble. You're going to drop the ball. Exactly as he said. You're going to be Jerry Rice when he was 8 versus when he was 28. All right, but you will get better. Just stick to it. All right. Next slide. Slide number 7 here. Mr. Badone, you had talked a little bit about your gatekeeper and how you approach it, which I would say, well, it's kind of like your opening value statement. And I know you wrote a blog post about this that everybody can find on the salesbuzz.com website. Talk to me about what you mean on opening value statement and how that really helps set the stage for the inevitable objections that we all know are going to come down the pipe.
Well, again, so my style is a little bit different. A lot of these objections that come down the pike are a symptom, and not just that's just the way the road is. You can avoid a lot of them. One of them is by having the right opening value statement. So let me just back up for a second. First of all, if you're in sales, especially doing outbound sales, if you're having call reluctance, if you're afraid of the gatekeeper or getting voicemail or not sure what to say to the prospect, this is very simple to solve. First things first, before you ever pick up the phone, you should realize there's only 3 things that are going to happen on that call. You're either going to get gatekeeper, voicemail, or prospect. And you're going to want a solution ahead of time. You're going to want to know what to say in each one of those scenarios, which that's why scripts work. I know a lot of people think scripts don't work. They absolutely, I think I'll be the first person to admit that there's a lot of sales scripts that create more problems than they solve. But when you get it right, it actually opens the door for you. So when it comes to an opening value statement, before you pick up the phone, you should know exactly what you're going to say if you get voicemail. You should know exactly what you're going to say if you get the gatekeeper. You should know exactly what you're going to say if you get the prospect on the phone. How many times have you made a call and the prospect actually answered and it threw you off your game for a second because you're like, oh, I didn't expect to get you? You know, that just means you're not prepared prior to picking up the phone. So you got to be prepared before you pick it up. And the way to gain that confidence is to know, I know it's going to be gatekeeper, voicemail, or prospect. If the gatekeeper answers, I'm going to use this opening value statement. If I get voicemail, I'm going to say this on voicemail. I'm going to use this opening value statement. If I get the prospect, I'm going to say this. And so you're going to want to have that and then formulate it in a way that's going to, for me, I found a long time ago as a straight commission sales rep, I would get tired of always overcoming the objections that I would get from a gatekeeper or the prospect or what have you. And so what I did was I fixed what I said after hello, my name is, and it eliminated a lot of them. And that's where the that's where the real power of the opening value statement comes in. It turns it from resistance to interest. And that's the key that you want your opening value statement. If you do that, you won't have to memorize a bunch of objection handling formulas because you're not getting those objections anymore.
All right. So basically, can you give me an example of what you're talking about?
So give me an example of what's one of the objections that I know we're going to get to this at the end.
We're going to get to that, but
pick one of those.
No, let's go back to what you were saying. I know I'm going to have either a gatekeeper is going to pick up the phone, or I'm going to go to voicemail, or I'm actually going to get the prospect themselves. So let's say the prospect.
So let me just give you the gatekeeper. Well, we'll do all three. So let's say the gatekeeper I mentioned earlier. Instead of putting when you put your situation with a gatekeeper, you put them in position to ask what's this regards to. A gatekeeper needs to know three things to do their job effectively, right? Their job is to qualify you. That's what a gatekeeper's for, right? So they need to know who you are, what company you're with, and your reason for the call. Most salespeople make the mistake of, hi, can I speak to so-and-so? And it forces the gatekeeper to go, my ass is calling. And you're like, oh, this is Michael. Can I please speak to so-and-so? And what company are you with? Oh, I'm with SalesBuzz. Again, if you could put me through, I'd appreciate it. What's the third thing they're going to ask? Oh, what's this in regards to? Yeah. Right? So I'm fighting already with a gatekeeper, which if I would have just said, if they answered, thanks for calling ABC, how can I help you? Hi, yes, this is Michael Padone with salesbuzz.com. And I'm getting back in touch with John Smith.
Done.
I answered all three things that they needed.
Yeah.
And now, so if it's if it's a straight up cold call, well, I wouldn't even ask if there's available. I just say that and I let it hang there. I'm like, okay.
I love that. Yeah. No, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. The power of dead air. Yeah, it's good.
Mm-hmm. Now, there has been times, right? Because somebody's going to use this, and there has been times where, have you ever gone to like a fast food restaurant and you tell them up front, this is to go? Yeah. And they take your order, and at the end they go, is this for here to go? And you're like, no, I'm still leaving, dude.
Yep.
There's going to be some times that a gatekeeper is so conditioned to just spit out and say, and what's the reason for the call? Again, I'm getting back in touch with him.
Yep.
That's it. Okay, 1 second. And so now you have to act confident. If you're nervous and you're not saying it confidently, then they're going to pick up on that, and now they're going to start asking questions. But this is why you have to role play this. You have to have the right strategies. But that's why I'm more about put yourself in their shoes. What do they have? What is their purpose of answering this call? And what is it? It's qualifying you or disqualifying you, however you want to look at it, right? And then, okay, well, if I'm qualified, I get put through. What information do they need to make me be qualified so they'll put me through? Well, the bare bones. You know who I am, company, and reason for the call. And you can give those up front, and now you don't even have the objection.
So the objection, and you need to put this in context of objection handling. The objection in that case, of course, is the prospect that you really want to get a hold of, the veto, right? They object to having interruptions that weren't scheduled or approved of. Therefore, the gatekeeper's job is to keep them out. And what you're doing is you're actually preempting the objections so that you get through. And I love that.
And all right, so go ahead.
No,
I got more.
I know you can. I'm just watching the clock. So what can you do if it's the prospect answers instead of the gatekeeper?
Well, yeah, back to the opening value statement. If I call and I say, hi, this is Michael Padone with salesbuzz.com, and I provide online sales training solutions, and I'd like to get on your calendars next Tuesday or Thursday, good for you, I'm going to get all kinds of stupid objections, deservedly so. One, I'm leading with what about me and had nothing to do with what, know what's in it for them. But if I call and I did my pre-call research, I found a sales director, the right size company, the right size location, or the right location, right annual revenue. I go, okay, this right industry, this matches my demographic. And I call and I get the sales director on the phone and I cold call him and I go, hi, yes, listen, this is Michael Padone with salesbuzz.com. The reason for my call, I specialize in helping outbound sales teams in the blank industry overcome call reluctance. And if I caught you at a good time, love to ask you a few questions just to see if what we have to offer maybe some help to you. Would that be okay? Yep. 80% of the time they're like, who says no to that if you're a sales director? Right. Because I know even if they already have another sales training solution in place, they probably still have call reluctance. If I'm calling the right size company, they got 20 to 200 sales reps. They're still dealing with call reluctance, right? So they can't say I already have a solution for that. But if I did say, I said, hey, I do online sales training, they could go, oh, we already use something like that, or we don't have the budget, or we already do it in-house. So I get rid of those objections by leading with the pain. That's the value of an opening value statement. And you need to know, one, you need to know how to craft it, but two, you need to know what it is before you pick up the phone. And you can't be a captain winging anymore.
All right, so a couple of things are going to happen with this one, right? Just to have, I'm going to do a little foreshadowing. I know people are going to say to you, yeah, I've done that spiel, and their immediate reaction is, I don't have time right now. I don't want you to answer that. We're going to answer that in a little bit. But I am getting commentary here from, the crowd there, and I'm sensing some sarcasm here. They're saying, so just be polite and introduce yourself and it helps get you through the gatekeeper? ?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Yeah, that's not what I said. Right. You can't be rude to the gatekeeper. You don't want to talk down to them because they'll make your life miserable. Right. So I just give them the three things that they need: who I am, my company I'm with, and the reason for the call. Right. That's all their job is to qualify you if you're moving on. And if you say, hey, yeah, we provide sales training, they're going to say, I don't think they'd be interested in that. Right. And now you're stuck, and now you got to arm wrestle with the gatekeeper, and then you got to find some fancy objections to overcome that. Right. Or you could just say, well, the reason for my call, I have an idea that might be able to help so-and-so get his team to overcome call reluctance. And I would just need to ask him a few questions to see if what we have might be a good fit. Would that be okay? Can you put me through? In that scenario, I might say that.
So your big point here, I know what you mean. Your big point here is the opening value statement can get rid of a lot of the stuff because you're preempting the questions they want, right? All right. Now, as far as the additional objections, no, I don't have time or anything else to what Michael Padone was just saying there. Now you're getting into this discussion. We're going to get there, folks. Hold your horses. I promise you're going to get there. And in fact, let's segue now. All right, I'm going to bring it over to Michael Halper. Now, Michael, you've got 3 techniques that you want to talk about today specifically. And again, folks, we're going to put these into practice when we get to the game show. But you've got 3 techniques. One's called, when you're hiding an objection, you can 1, comply, 2, you can overcome, or 3, you can deflect. So let's educate us, Mr. Halper. What do you mean by comply or overcome or deflect?
Sure. And before we move on, actually, I just want to kind of augment what Michael was saying, because I agree with him in that he's saying if I say this, then I can decrease the objections that I have to face. And that's the key, getting rid of the problem, not the symptom. And I agree with that. I think one way to add to what he was saying is he was emphasizing saying a value proposition or value statement. Another way that I like to look at it is decrease how much you look like a salesperson that's trying to sell something. So that's the opposite of what he was saying. He was saying say something good. And another way to look at it is avoid saying bad stuff, which is I'm a salesperson, I'm trying to sell something, which is a very natural thing to do, because if you're a salesperson, you just went through product training, you're given a bag, a quota, and a list of a territory, then it's natural to go out and talk about your product and try to be a salesperson. So it's intuitive to do that. It's counterintuitive to avoid doing that. And in addition to what Michael said, there are small things you could do to also, and by doing both what he said and not sound like a salesperson, you can decrease your objections. And I agree with all of that 100%. Now, getting to the 3 options that you mentioned. So to simplify it, I basically think, and kind of how Michael mentioned also, there's three things that can happen when you make a call. You can get a gatekeeper, you can get a prospect, you can get a voicemail. To simplify it like that as well, there are three ways to handle an objection. You can comply, you can overcome, or you can deflect, in my opinion. So let me go through each of those one at a time. So to comply is, let's say that someone says, I'm not interested. That's the objection. So to comply would be to say, oh, okay, have a nice day. Very simple. You're complying and accepting and moving on. To overcome the objection would be if someone says, I'm not interested, would be to say something like, oh, so you guys aren't looking at increasing sales? We typically help our customers to increase sales by 20 to 30%. That's not something you're interested in? So what I just did there is I'm trying to overcome. I'm trying to change the prospect from not interested to either interested or being more open-minded. So that's overcoming. The third would be deflect. And an analogy or metaphor to kind of picture this is if you can go back to the Karate Kid, the original version with Mr. Miyagi, and remember wax on and wax off and paint the fence to deflect the attack from the other person. So that's what deflect is. So let me give you an example. It's basically to brush off the objection and keep moving forward. And so if someone says, I'm not interested, a deflection approach would be to say, oh, okay, yeah, hey, I understand. But if I can ask you real quick, how confident are you that your sales reps are properly handling objections? And so basically you're asking a question, and then the more likely response to that is that the prospect answers the question, and then you can either then follow up with another question or drill into their answer. And so what you've done there is you've gotten around or deflected, not necessarily get around, but more so bounce off the objection and continue to move forward. So those are the three objection responses the way I see it. Now the key is which one should you use? And the answer is that you need to probably use all three. There's no right or wrong way to go. The key is when do you do which objection response or method. And so if we go back through those to comply, you really do need to comply with objections in certain situations. The key is that are you complying right out of the gate? That's not good. Then you can that you're being too easy and you're going to get stomped all over. So one rule that you could use is to only comply on the third objection after trying to get around it 3 times. So that you get an objection, you try 2 or 3 times, and if you can't get around it, then you may comply. So that, and if you don't do that, then you just end up potentially decreasing rapport and creating more friction, which then you're just wasting everybody's time. So whether or not you agree with that, maybe you might see it as on 4 attempts or 6 attempts, but there's just a soft rule there of 3, after 3 attempts, comply. Now the second, yeah, go ahead, Daryl.
No, I was just going to ask a question. So give me an example of that.
Yeah.
If I say to you, we don't have time right now, we're not looking. You would comply immediately with that. You would wait. You would counter, and then eventually you would just comply and say, "What? Can I schedule time to call you back in 6 months' time, or what?"
Let's use maybe a different objection, which is I'm not interested.
Okay,
or other than I'm busy right now.
Yep.
If you say I'm not interested, and I say, oh, okay, well, are you guys currently using any type of structured sales methodology? Then let's say if you answer that and say no, we're not, or yes, we are, then I can ask another question. But let's say you don't play along,
right?
And you say, I'm really not interested.
Yep.
And then I can try again to say, oh yeah, hey, listen, I understand, and honestly, I'm not trying to get you to switch anything today. I was just curious, is decreasing sales staff turnover a priority for you at all? So I've just asked a different question. And if they say, no, listen, I'm not going to answer your question, I'm not interested, then maybe I ask another question or I comply. But even just in that role play, you can see how that someone has to be pretty much on their game as being a difficult prospect or just a flat out jerk to be that difficult. I mean, when you deflect, the majority of the time, they just answer your question. I mean, they have to be a complete, Now, if when you try to overcome the objection, then it's very easy for someone to say, listen, I told you I'm not interested. Because if they say I'm not interested and you say, oh, but we help to increase sales by 30%, you're not interested in 30%, then it's very easy and probably more comfortable for someone to say, no, listen, I'm not interested. So that's what I mean by comply after 3 attempts.
So I love your example there, Michael. So, I'm not interested. And you said, oh, is this not of interest to you, what have you? That was you deflecting. Is that a fair statement? You were deflecting and asking another question to try to drill down.
So the deflection, so to simplify what I just went through there, for deflecting objections, you're basically just asking a different or a related question.
Exactly.
And even to give a little bit more color to that, so you might say, well, that's great, but I don't know what questions I should be asking, and that's very understandable. So there's 2 categories of questions that I think are good in that scenario. So one would be what I call pain questions. So these are questions that look for pain. So think about it if you sell a pill or a device that helps someone to sleep well at night, right? So a pain question would be, how well are you sleeping at night? How many nights out of the week do you toss and turn? Do you ever find yourself waking up and not able to go back to sleep? Those are what I would call pain questions. The pain is tossing and turning, and you're asking a question to see how much that exists. So those are really great for deflecting. So if you come up with 2 or 3 pain questions, you will have a response for a lot of the common objections. I know we'll talk about that, I think, here later. The other type of questions that you can deflect to are what I would call current environment questions. So those are, what are you using today? How long have you been using them? How's it going? What do you like? What don't you like? Have you ever looked at making a change? Asking about the current environment. So I gave you an example of that in the role play, which was they say, I'm not interested. And when I said, well, do you guys currently use any type of sales methodology today? That's a current environment question. I'm not necessarily looking for pain. I'm asking what they're doing today. So those should, if you have some questions, those should give you objection responses right there.
Okay, so what I love about this is I've talked about this before, especially on our podcast. I did an episode with Randy Ramirzma. That's the Inside Sales podcast, and we talked about discovery questions. And a lot of this stuff applies here in objection handling. I reference a framework that I use. It's called SPICED, SPICED. But the first one is S. What's your situation? Which is what I'm hearing Michael talk about. Is what's the current event? I'm sorry. What's the current situation? Then the next one is SPICE P is pain, which is funny to hear Michael talk about pain. And then I'll go one step further. The I is impact. So what's interesting here is I'm hearing Michael saying you can deflect or you can overcome, but you're using questions. And he was very specific. He's like, do you have your pain questions? Have you defined them? Do you know them? All right. Have you talked about your situational questions? Have you defined them? Do you know them? In other words, you're equipped. You've got those quivers for your bow, and you can shoot them as you need them, as opposed to going, I don't know. So a lot of it is readiness, which is what both Michaels talked about when we started this process. So you go into battle with all the tools you need to react and respond based on how the conversation goes. One last question for you here, Michael. You talked about comply. So is comply truly a way of handling objection, or is it a way of accepting defeat and living to fight another day?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I don't really consider complying an objection way to handle objection. It's probably kind of it's more of the three things that you can do, and so it's less of a objection handling technique and more of what you might end up having to do at some point. And so it's 3 of the different outcomes that could happen. And one thing that we skipped real quick is we didn't talk much about overcoming objections. In fact, I made overcoming sound fairly negative. And so there are times when you do need to overcome. When you're first reaching out on a call or talking to someone for the first time, whether at a networking event or over the phone or whatever, I don't recommend overcoming, because as you can see, deflecting is very effective. Overcoming is basically changing someone's mind. And if you're on a cold call, for example, changing someone's mind is a difficult thing to do, and you don't have the time to really take on that difficult challenge. And honestly, your goal of the cold call is to not sell the product. So even the fact if someone says, I'm not interested is a reason for them not to buy your product. It's not a reason for them not to talk to you or for you not to have a conversation. So there's no reason to overcome, because your goal of the cold call should not be to sell the product. Your goal of the cold call is to most likely set an appointment or start the conversation. So in a cold call situation, don't try to overcome, and you have to keep that in mind, because your natural instinct is, when someone says I'm not interested, is to try to overcome and make them interested. But when you get to the meeting, the appointment, during the sales process, you do need to overcome, and to try to overcome objections is not a negative thing, but you just use that tactic later in the sales process.
So what example be an objection could be, I just can't afford you, and overcoming that might be, well, how much do you think it would cost, or why do you think that? Is that in a way of overcoming it? Because that's not a deflection. You're addressing it head on.
Yeah, excellent example. So if someone says we can't afford you, well, so that could happen on a cold call, and your response could be, hey, listen, I understand, and I'm not calling you here today to sign you up. I don't even know if you need what I sell. I just want to start the conversation with you, and honestly, I don't know if you can't afford it. I don't even know what the price would be. So let's just start the dialogue. We won't spend too much time on it, and we can talk about the costs and what you can do later. So let's not rule that out. So that's the way to handle that. That's kind of more of a deflecting to what I would call deflecting to the sales process instead of deflecting to a pain question. Yep. You're still not trying to change their mind of that they don't have enough money. But during the sales process, you don't want to just keep ignoring that, because you don't want to waste your time if they genuinely can't afford you. But let's say once you're in the meeting and the appointment, then you need to really try to qualify this person. Can they buy from me? Do they have the money? Do they have the authority? And if they say, I just can't afford this, then it is time to overcome the objection, which is to learn a little bit more, to say, okay, well, let's take a look here. Let's see what it would cost, and and maybe they don't have the budget, and then you can try to overcome it by seeing what other costs you can offset and to increase their budget or decrease their costs in another area, total cost of ownership, and that would be overcoming the objection. So deflecting at the cold call beginning, and then trying to overcome later when it's more of an established conversation.
All right, so getting an objection, there's three ways you can respond. You can deflect, which is often what you see early in the process of a cold call, for example. You can overcome, and while that may happen in a cold call, you'll probably see it more often as the sale goes further down the road, or you can eventually comply and live the fight another day. Now, with that said, let's move on to Mr. Michael Padone, who's going to talk about two tactics you can use, one being to isolate and one being to follow the steps. So, Michael, because I want to make sure we get to the game show here, Fast and Furious, talk to me about isolating and following the steps.
Look, there's so much there that we could unpack. The first thing is I just quickly made a note that you were talking about salespeople. They want to worry about not being a salesperson. Then every sales call I make to solve that problem, every sales call I make is I have the goal. My objective is actually to see if I can help, not sell. So I'm actually calling to see if I can help them. So when I get that mentally right, my tone gets right. Like, I'll actually pretend that the person I'm calling was referred to me by my best friend. It's their uncle or something like that. So it just gets my mood right, my tone right. I'm calling to see if I can help, not sell. So that I just had that note from earlier. I think Mike's right. Those are three outcomes that you can have on an objection. I'm not sure if he's saying you should use all of those. It's probably based on a scenario. One of the things that I prefer not to do is not to get my prospect to be on the defensive. And I had somebody the other day call me, and they tried one of those where, well, don't you want to save more money? And I'm like, listen, if you've ever tried that, or if you've ever been on the other end, they're asking you a question that you can't say no to. You're exposing yourself more as a salesperson that's interested in you and not helping. So there's a couple other ways that I think that you could get the conversation going just to smooth it out. There's the last thing is the objections that you get in the beginning are different than if you get them later on, like the pricing objection, for example. So it really depends on where you want to start on this conversation here. If you want to pick up, if you put the slide back up, if you want to put if you want to start where I think it was isolate, right? Is that number 4? Is that what we had?
Isolate. Yep.
Okay. So watch this. So first of all, when I'm doing a sales call, it's not to set a meeting. I'm calling to qualify them. I don't care if I'm going to meet them face to face or not. I've closed plenty of people on the one call close. I have larger deals that take in many calls, but the first thing is that I want to qualify. Qualify means I get a conversation going to see if they have a problem that I can solve. I got to find out what their role is in the decision-making process. And believe it or not, I'm probably the only person that's out there in the world that teaches this. And when it comes to this, is I qualify on price before I even do a presentation. And so if somebody said to me, we couldn't afford that, if I got to that point in the sales process where I'm talking about price and I'm qualifying them on that price range, and they say, yeah, it's just out of our budget, we can't afford that. The isolation part is, well, actually I have a 5-step process. The first thing is I recognize that, hey, can I sidestep this? One of, like Mike said, can you just deflect, or can you sidestep it, or do I have to address it? If I have to address it, that's step one. Second thing is I want to use some empathy here. They go, yeah, listen, that's really just, we can't afford that. Instead of me saying, trying to come back with an objection right away, I'm going to respond with, listen, I understand. Look, if I were in your shoes, I'd want to get the highest ROI possible for your investment as well. Let me ask you this. So what I just did there was I'm on the same side of the table. I lower their guard by saying, listen, I understand. If I were in your shoes, I'd want the highest ROI possible for your investment. Let me ask you this. That let me ask you this is taking control of the call by dropping their guard. And now I can get to isolation. How many of the people listening to this webcast right now, you got an objection, your boss or your manager or whatever told you, if you get this objection, handle it with this. And so you read back the company policy on, or the objection that they want you to handle, and all of a sudden the prospect came up with a brand new objection.
Often.
And then you tried to handle that one. And then they come up with another one, right? Most times an objection, look, when it comes to an objection, you have to understand something. It's either the prospect is telling the truth or they're lying. Those are the only two options, right? So if it's either they're telling the truth or they're lying, you have to decide which one it is real quick. So the way to do that is this, because if they're telling you the truth and you don't handle it, you might not ever get them on the phone again. If they're lying to you and you try to handle it, you're just going to spin your wheels. So the thing is this, is that I want to find out if, first of all, is this a real objection or is it a red herring? So I recognize I have to handle it. I do the empathy, lower their guard, regain control by saying, let me ask you this. And now I get to isolation. But it's a 2-part process. So when I say to isolation, it goes, let me ask you this. Other than price, is there anything else stopping you from moving forward with us right now?
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's
right?
Awesome. Yeah.
And so they got 2 choices. It's either yes or no. Right? They're like, most prospects, if you're towards the close and you get an objection on price, right? Actually, you should never be getting a budget objection. That's different than price. A budget objection at the end of the process of the sales process means you skipped steps earlier, or you were never taught the right way to sell. I'm just going to say it, plain and simple. But if you get a pricing objection at the end, then the simple thing is this: other than price or anything else stopping you from moving forward with us, most prospects are going to have a knee-jerk reaction. Go, nope, that's it. Your price is too high. So I'm still going to isolate and I'll go, okay, so if I could solve that to your satisfaction, we can move forward with the order.
Yep.
And now I shut up.
Yep. I love
if they
that.
come, notice, now listen, notice I didn't say I'd lower price or anything of that nature. I just said, okay, so if I could solve that to your satisfaction, we can move forward with the order. And I'm just clarifying. And if they said what you just said, we go, yeah, if you can solve that, I'm in. Then that means I have the real objection. It's not a red herring. It's down to price. And now you go to your step 4 where you handle it. And then step 5, you just close the sale because you know it's a real objection. So this is the time you would use your sales script to use the objection for that type of, or you use your rebuttal, for that type of rejection, because you know you have the real objection. But most times what's going to happen is they're going to realize you just put them in a box. And if it's not the real objection, they're going to go, yeah, no, I still don't think I'm ready to move forward with it. So now see, instead of wasting time trying to handle it when it wasn't the real objection, now you smoked it out. And now you can simply go, okay, I appreciate you sharing that with me. Just, obviously price isn't really what's stopping you from moving forward with this. Do you mind if I ask what is? And then shut the hell up. Don't say another word. Then they'll pop. They'll pop with a new objection. And then when you get a new objection, just go, okay, so if I could solve that to your satisfaction, and then what you'll probably hear a lot is, yeah, if you solve that, I'm in. And now you have the real objection. So now you go to step 4, and this is where you use your internal sales scripts or your rebuttals to handle that objection, because now you have the real objection. And then you just handle it and you assume the order and close. And you're going to start closing a lot more deals that way.
So what I
want everybody.
But I want to stop you for a second. So what I just really heard you say, I'm kind of bringing the two together here. I kind of heard there's an objection, and I'm bringing both Michaels together. First, there was deflection by using all your questions you got figured out around pain or situation or impact or all that kind of stuff. That's that. So you're going to deflect with more questions with your library. But then if they still keep on objecting using the other Michaels, you're going to isolate and try to overcome using what you've already been taught. And if you can't overcome, and then they say, no, it's not just price, it's this and this and this and this and this. Fine, I'm going to comply and say, boom, and live to fight another day. So I love how this is coming together, but I just wanted to kind of bring that all together, guys. I apologize for jumping in. Now you had followed the steps.
I think Mike would agree. I think mine's at the end of the sale objections, and he was more talking about in the beginning of it.
Yeah,
and there are two different scenarios. They're two different situations. So one technique could work for the beginning, and then you have the other one for if you get it at the end. But again, I just feel like if I use the right opening value statement, I eliminate most of the ones I normally get in the beginning, and then the objections at the end of the sale. If I follow my sales process, I properly qualify somebody. I normally don't get objections at the end anyway. It's just negotiation, and that's where I want to be anyway.
Okay, follow the steps. Talk to me about that, quick and dirty.
So you have to understand, so you have to pique interest, gain permission to continue the call, and we didn't even get into that. So if you've noticed, when I use my opening value statement, first of all, Mike is right. There's sales reps that'll just hear no, not interested. They scare it off the phone. They hang up and they go to the next call. They kind of have their tail between the legs. Then you have some of the veterans that are out there that'll hang in there, and even though they said no, they have tough skin, they have Teflon. They're going to ask some other questions, try to get the conversation going. For me, and I've done all of those before. I would say I was nervous. I hung up. I would hang in, ask questions. Sometimes when you hang in and ask questions, you still get like some like I think you said earlier, a prospect that's just really being a jerk, and it could ruin your day. So I went ahead and found a way where I will create an opening value statement that's so front loaded with what's in it for them, but not overdoing it, just agitating that pain. And then when I go, I will not move on until I ask if I get permission to continue the call. So I'll say, and if I caught you at a good time, like to ask you a few questions just to see if what we have to offer maybe is some help to you. Would that be okay? And if they say no to that, which we're going to get to in your questions, we can role play that. I'll show you what I say if they say no to that, and then when I decide to, just comply and go away. But I have a technique that I call planting the seed that gets them to call me back, which I'll share with you guys as we come up.
Okay, so we're going to go fast and furious now. We're at the game show. Our next slide brings up game show. There we go. And we call this game show, next slide, overcome that objection. All right, so this is the way the game works. I'm going to throw an objection at my experts. They've got seconds, mere seconds to get in a real call to give me their best shot at it. And then I will arbitrarily make up points and give them or not. And then we will make up a winner, and there is no prize. So there we go. Here we go. Objection number 1. We're going to start with Mr. Padone. Mr. Padone, I hear what you're saying, but I'm just too busy right now.
I totally get it. Listen, I'm not calling you out of the blue. I did some research on what it is that you do. There's a very good chance I might be able to help you solve X. I just need to ask you a few questions. Would that be okay?
Fine. That's good. I like it. Mr. Halper, the pressure's all on you. First question into the game. Mr. Halper, I hear what you're saying. I'm just too busy right now.
Hey, Daryl, I understand. Listen, I can be extremely brief, or I can call you back this afternoon. Which would you prefer? Oh, I like both of these responses. I'm going to give you both 10 points each. All right, next objection. We're going to start with Mr. Halper first. Mr. Halper, I took the call. I'm sorry, but I'm just not interested. Mr. Halper. Yeah, listen, I understand, and I'll pause real quick. I'll give you my long. So
Sure.
the short answer is a deflect to a question, but then I insert sort of like a objection little diffuser in the beginning. So the diffuser is, hey, listen, I understand, and Daryl, honestly, I'm not calling you to try to sign you up for anything and sell you anything. I don't even know if we're a good fit for you guys. I was just wondering real quick, how long does it take you typically to onboard a new salesperson?
Okay. Okay, that's a tough one. Let's see if Padone can step it up. Padone,
Yeah,
I don't care how
I go
nice you
right.
are. I'm not interested.
Listen, I understand that you probably get these calls all the time. All I know is that I've recently helped, and then I'll name 3 people in his industry. I recently helped so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so set 25% more appointments and increase their close rate by 30%. There's a possibility I can do the same for you. I just need to ask you a few quick questions. Would that be okay?
Okay. You guys are both kicking ass. Both of those would work with me, and I'm a hard ass, just so you know. I prefer to call myself
Are you now?
a dick when it comes to being the buyer. So you both get 10 points in that each too. All right. So one of you's got to break out here. We're going to go back to Badone first. Yeah. I hear you. I understand. I'm really busy right now. Just send me some information, please. Badone.
Who's saying this, the gatekeeper or the prospect?
On the prospect. Just send me some information.
You're the prospect? So let me ask you, once, no problem, more than happy to do that. I think that's a good place to start. Once you get the information, if you really like what you read, what happens next? Where do we go from there?
Oh, that is the way I would respond. That's exactly how I would handle that objection. And I do that all the time. Okay, pressure's on Halper. Just send me some information, dude.
Hey, Daryl, I can certainly do that so that I know exactly what best to send you. Can I ask you real quick, how well are your reps currently getting around objections right now?
Oh, there's this little diffuser followed by his deflection. Don't you love that? And both of these guys, I would respond to that. Okay, this is awesome. We're going to move it on. 10 points each for that one. To close me here, folks, 30-30. Next objection. We already have someone for that, but thanks anyway. And we're going to go with Halper first.
Yeah, Daryl, listen, I understand, and listen, I'm not trying to get you guys to switch today. I definitely don't want you to rip out anything that that's currently working. If I could ask you real quick, what are you guys using for a CRM over there?
These guys, they're not even like breaking a sweat with me. Okay, Badone, I'm sure you're a nice guy, but we already have someone for that.
Yeah, I don't get that objection because I don't go in saying I do sales training. I go in and say I solve this. But let's just pretend along you did say that, right? So listen, whereas somebody doesn't listen, I totally get that. Here's the thing. There's a possibility that I might be an added resource for you when your current solution doesn't meet your needs. Would you mind if I just asked you a few questions just to see if the need comes up, you'll have an alternative source to go to in the event you need it? Would that be okay?
This is where I would respond to you with, I hear you, but I just don't have time.
Not a problem. So let me ask you this. If I can go ahead and get you some information over, would you go ahead and set a time up this afternoon?
Isolating. Do you see what he's doing there, folks? This is awesome. Okay, next step.
I'm stumbling. Listen, I'm going to admit, I'll give Albert the points on that one because, listen, I'm going to admit I don't get that objection because I fixed my opening value statement to not have it. So I really
this is great, though. This is the
lesson.
lesson.
Be able to think on your seat.
And I love that Padone's sitting here saying, I'll give that one to Halper, but that doesn't, because I preempt it, this is why he beat me here, because I do this here. Yeah. It's just technique and style, guys. It's also the fact that, maybe give that one Halper and that one, but next time he'll be more prepared. All right, next one. Padone, here we go. I hear you, but we just don't have money in the budget for this right now. Thanks anyways.
Yeah, where are you getting that objection? Is that during the sales call? Is it in the first few seconds? You know what I mean?
Yeah, this could be in the first few seconds because I know what you do roughly. You've told me, and I know typically what they go for because I've engaged you before or I've done my research, so I'm not a moron. Okay. Which is why I fit your ICP. So I'm assuming what your prices are, and I don't have money right now.
All right, listen, I totally get that. You might not even know that some of the things that I have going on. I'm not even sure if it's a good fit. All I know is the reason why I'm calling you is I recently helped, and again, I'll name 3 of his competitors that I worked with to grow sales by this. There's a chance I can help you. I just need to ask you a few questions first to be sure. To be sure, would that be okay?
Okay, so total. I love that response when I get the response, as long as the competitors are of direct relevance to me. So for example,
And if I don't have them, go ahead.
Yeah,
Well,
someone
I just
says
want everybody to know I have my research done. I'll research.
exactly.
I'll look at my database, and before I call. Notice I never say, "Hey, we help competitors or we help companies like you," because everybody says that. So if I call somebody, I always say, "Okay, is this a small business, mid-sized enterprise? What industry are they in?" I pull up my database, do a quick report in Salesforce, show me everybody in that industry that I've already closed business with, that company size. I got this person, this person, this person. I call it the competition template. That's my OVS competition template. So if I'm calling them, I've already done my research. It takes me just a few seconds, and I already know. So listen, if I, like, for example, I help enterprise level sales teams increase sales by showing them how to overcome objections. I've done it for SAP, BlackBerry, and 3M. And I'd like to ask you a few questions to see if I might be able to help you as well. And that's if I'm calling like Caterpillar or somebody, right? So I'm mentioning, might not even be their competitor, but I'm naming other Fortune 500 accounts that are in that level, and that'll be okay. Or if I'm not in that level or that industry, I'll just use their title. Listen, I really help sales directors who have outbound B2B sales reps get better results out of their team, show them how to overcome call reluctance and increase their sales rate. There's a possibility I might be able to help you. I just need to ask you a few questions. Would that be okay? I mean, who says no to that, even if they're busy, right?
Notice
I didn't guarantee them anything. Yep. There's 2 points here before we run out of time. The reason why I always want to gain permission to continue the call is because if I use a question to gain control of them, everybody on this call, if you've been in sales for more than a week and you do that, you still know there's that tension between you and the prospect. Their guard is still up. Right. So they even if they're answering you, they're kind of reluctantly going along with you. And you're just hoping that they forget about you. You're trying to bring them along. But they still have that resistance there. When I go ahead and I will not move into the asking the pain point. This is just my style. No right or wrong. It's just the way I do it. I will not move into the pain point questions, things of that nature, until I gain permission to continue the call, because then it's almost like the difference is you're showing up with a warrant. They'll let you in, but they're not happy you're there. I'm showing up with cake. You know what I mean? Like, hey, you got time for lunch, and then all of a sudden they let me in, and now I can ask those questions and their guard is down and we're having a more conversation. It's very structured the way I have it. So that's why it gets really good results that way.
Okay. We're going to overtime, folks, because this is kicking ass, but we're going to keep the overtime to a minimum. So stay tuned. If you have to leave, we understand. We'll send you the recording. But in the overtime, Mr. Halper, I hear you, but we just don't have money in the budget for this right now.
Hey, Daryl, I understand. And listen, I mean, I'm not reaching out to you to sign you up today and sell you anything. More so, I'm looking to open the dialogue between our two organizations. And, I'd like to learn a little bit more about you. We can share some information about us if it makes sense. And then our goal there is that when your budget opens up or when you begin your budget planning, you can know who we are and how we can help. So what we'd simply like to do is just start a brief conversation. Are you available to schedule a 15, 20-minute meeting next week?
No, I'm not, but maybe a month from now.
Sure. We're not going anywhere.
I love that. Do you guys notice the little grin that Halper had on his face there? That was all of it. That shit-eating grin. That was fantastic. Okay. I can call that one a 10-10-1. Last one in our overtime round here. We're going to mix it up. Instead of going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, I'm going to go to Padone on this one. Mr. Padone, I'm sure you're a nice guy. I am interested, but I'm just not interested right now. Call me next year.
So there's 2 buckets here, and one of my articles just came out about this. It's either going to be a legitimate thing, right? And then if you press them because your manager is putting pressure on you to close deals before the end of the year, but they have a legitimate reason, and you press them, you could jeopardize that deal. They don't even do business with you in January, and you're going to want that deal in January, right? So you have to figure out how to put it in which bucket. The other bucket is it's a blow off or a stall. So how do you find out which one it is? You just simply do this. Okay, so Daryl, let me ask you a question. When I follow up with you in January, what happens next? Where do we go from there?
Well, but then I'll have a better idea of my budget and my resources. Right now, we're just swamped. There's too much going on.
Okay, see, again, this wouldn't have happened because I didn't. I would have qualified you better on the problem, your role, and then I talk about price before I get to. I give a price range before I do my presentation, so that I would have found out if I'm in your ballpark, and if I would have handled all that already, you know. And so this is why I do it in the order. So one, I get you to agree that yeah, okay, I gain permission, right? Okay, I got a second. Go ahead. I ask what I call an engagement question, so I get the conversation going, get you thinking about in an area. I'll identify the opportunity size by simply going, just out of curiosity, how many sales reps do you have? Or if I'm selling software, you know, how many seats do you have for this, right? And then I get to the pain point. Once I get problem recognition, and now it's reverse, because what's human instinct when a prospect, when somebody recognizes they have a problem, what's the initial instinct that they want to do? If you tripped and fell and you broke your arm, no matter what's on your plate, I got to solve this. I got to
fix it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I get that. Once I get that going, then I'm going to qualify them on their role in the purchasing process. Just you can't do it on title alone. You're going to have to ask some questions. So if I get problem recognition and I got somebody that can be part of the decision-making process, I qualify on their time frame when they would prefer to solve that, and then I'm going to get to the price range on that. And that's why I said if you ever get to the end of a sale and they say it's not in the budget, nobody taught you how to qualify. Because I'm going to say, so let me just give you an example. You know, our price range based on to solve this problem, you're going to be looking at between this and this. If you really like what we have to offer and you decide you want to move forward with it, is that doable for you? You know, I'm going to find out early if it's not, you know, this. I got my problem first, right? We definitely agree that you committed that you want to solve that. You're the right person to be involved. Now I'm going to let you know, if we solve it, it's going to be between this range and this range. Is that doable? And if it's not, that's when I would have found out, listen, I'm going to have to wait till our 2020. And then I'll say, okay, other than that, is there anything else stopping you from moving forward with this?
Boom.
Nope, that's it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. Got it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You can see how it's where kind of the questions and the discovery kind of overruns into the objections. And it's kind of how many questions can you get out to qualify before the objections start coming. But then you can deflect if it's early, and then you can overcome if it's later. I mean, I love this. So hold that thought.
The last thing
Go ahead. The last thing.
I was saying, yeah, the last thing your listeners need to know is that if you're getting the 2020 objection and it's the latter part where it's a blow off, it's not that, hey, they were going to roll. It's a blow off. It's you messed up in problem recognition. You never got them to agree that there's a problem that they want solved. That's the number one step that most people skip. And that's why you're getting the objection. So you could follow up until the kingdom come, 2021, 22, 23, 24, whatever. They're not buying from you. Meanwhile, they'll probably buy from your competitor who got in there, got them talking about a problem, got committed there's a problem, and all of a sudden they found the money to get it done and handle it. That's how you sell.
And I'll go one step further. You guys out there in your sales roles who are saying, my solution does A, B, and C, and these are features you do, and you're expecting me, the buyer, to say, oh, I've got a problem, and maybe your B can match up, can solve my problem. That doesn't work. Yeah. I just walk away from that, right? So to your point, Mr. Pillon, you got to ask the right questions to qualify in the first place. You got to pull it out of me. Okay, Halper. You got the last chance of this one. You can win it all right here. You've got a wee bit of an edge. Call me in 2020 for the victory. Do it, man.
Wait, didn't I get 1,000 points for that answer?
No, well, wait. Well, I have to see his answer, and then I arbitrarily make it up.
A little color for this scenario, because I think this objection comes up most common in sales lead follow-up, where you've already met with them, you've already spoken to them, and you're following up, and they say, oh, yeah, call me in 6 months or call me in 2020, call me. Well, they're kicking the can down the road, right? So in that scenario, hopefully you've asked some pain questions in my terminology, which means you've identified some things that the prospect isn't happy about that you can solve, and so the response to the kicking the can down the road would be something like this. Daryl, listen, I certainly can call you in 2020, no problem at all. We're not going anywhere. But listen, I'm just kind of confused because when we spoke originally, you mentioned that you had an extremely high turnover. And I know that can be extremely costly on the organization, not only in missed sales, but also recruiting and labor costs. So I'm just curious, are you okay really not dealing with those issues and those concerns until 2020? Or are you interested in keeping that conversation going so that you can resolve those issues?
I'm smiling because I hate that question because it's a tough question. Because if I say, no, of course I'm not interested, then of course that's what you want me to say because then you can go. And if I say, I'm never going to, you're making me feel guilty, but it's not being malicious. So I've had this, it works. And this usually I go, and then okay, fine. And we have a conversation. So I'm loving it. Okay. So who won? We're out of questions. We're also way out of time. Who won while you were wrapping it up with the questions, with the responses on that last question? As Mr. Halper was giving his final answer, I polled the audience. I'm smarter than you. And I said, who won? And the answer was, we did. That's from the audience, not from me. So therefore, we call it a draw. Everybody won. That's the answer. Welcome, folks. You both win absolutely nothing from the game show here at VanillaSoft. Enjoy that. Use it as you want to. Ladies and gentlemen, we're done.
This is just because I beat you in that last lead generation thing, right?
It is. That's right. You're not beating me twice. That's right. I control the scoreboard this time. We're done. We're out of time. So with that said, let's bring up our panelist slides again. I want you to see there's their email address. All right. So you can go to salesbuzz.com for Michael Padone, or you can email him directly. If you're watching this offline, there's his email. Michael Halper, go to salesscripter.com. If you're watching this offline, there's his email. You should have reached out to all three of us by now on LinkedIn and sent connection requests. If you haven't, then I will mock you and say you suck as salespeople, because it's always about building a network. With that, folks, we're done. We're out of time. I apologize for going long. We try hard not to do this here, but when the content is this good, you just got to keep going. As I saw in the session here, when one of the people said was, and I love this one, was, damn, I have to go to a pipeline meeting, but you guys are on fire. So with that, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. Guys, please do me a favor. Give these guys a holler on LinkedIn. Follow up with them. In the meantime, if you like this show, there's more of them at VanillaSoft.com. My name is Daryl Prale. I'm with VanillaSoft. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.